Okay, I think it's time to start. We're running, I'm starting about 10 minutes late, but there's nothing scheduled to happen in here afterwards. And if anyone here does want to run off to the Swift talk, I will be quite happy for you to do so because I'm not that exciting. This talk's called Fraudulent Perl, and it's not about PHP or anything else like that. It's essentially about what I have been doing since that YAPC last year in Granada. So a little bit about me. My name is Jason Clifford. I work for YAPC Net-a-Porter. This time last year I worked for Net-a-Porter. I'm a delivery manager there, but I'm actually a Perl developer who's pretending to be a manager. I also own a small bedroom ISP called UK Free Software Network. I've got a few modules up on CPAN, and I'm a late talk submissions specialist. I submitted this talk last week and didn't know if I was going to come to YAPC until after the talk was confirmed. But here I am, and here's the talk. So, the slides are a bit rubbish, but they are the result of this morning. Hence, they're on PowerPoint, because that was what was on my Mac. So a year ago, we at Net-a-Porter at NAP discovered that everything changes. We were about to not be NAP anymore. We were about to become a different company as a result of a merger. And that was going to have some impact on us, and I was busy at the time discovering what some of that impact was. A bit of history. At Net-a-Porter, on the tech side of things, we essentially wrote everything in-house. Not quite everything, but close enough. And almost all of our back-end systems were written in Perl, thanks to people like Gianni. There was some Scala in there, which is sort of the flavor of the month, been introduced and so on, and some Java, particularly on the front end. But all of the things that were actually the engine for the business were happening in Perl, and still are. But that was very much, and is very much, a monolithic architecture, and we were trying to move towards more of a service-oriented architecture for a whole bunch of reasons. As is the case in many places, Perl had been labeled as legacy, but legacy just means that's what we actually use. It's what works. And we had a large team of people, and we still do, dedicated to building and supporting all of this. This time last year, I was spending a lot of time in workshops as a result of a merger, and we were being told there was going to be a new architecture, and that's what all those workshops were for. As a result of a merger, we had two of everything. All very similar, because both are e-commerce companies with a very similar history, but not that similar. So while we were predominantly Perl-based and a bit of Java and so on the other side, they were predominantly .NET on Windows. But, and this is the important bit, we were all legacy, which is great. It's the stuff that got us to where we were, to where we are. And there was already a program in place in the YAPC side of things to replace everything with a new platform, and that platform was Enterprise, which basically means IBM, Informatica, and so on. So I was busy at that time and had been busy enjoying a month of workshops, all day, every day. Oh dear. But before we could go on to actually start moving on from workshops to more workshops, I needed a break, and YAPC came to stop me from jumping off a bridge. So off to Granada for sun, beer, free tapas, and Perl. A very welcome relief, fantastic conference. And it was the first time my wife joined me at a conference or any tech event. So she came and she listened to some of the lightning talks. She enjoyed herself enormously. And then at the end of the week, I had what should have been a short trip to Bologna, where YAPC are based, but due to various traditional summer aviation activities, strikes, it took about 20 hours to get there, and I arrived 4 hours before I was supposed to be in one of these joyous workshops. So I went from YAPC to YAAW, yet another architecture workshop. I tried to turn that into yawn, but I couldn't quite stretch it. So we were looking through a whole bunch of architecture, and we'd already been looking through it. We'd already identified that there were a bunch of holes in this new enterprise platform that we were being given. And the ones that were of particular interest to me were fraud prevention, order data repository, customer data, payments platform. And that's because that's the kind of thing that I'm involved in at NAP. There were other areas as well, but those were my areas of concern. And I thought, well, we can do all of that. We're already doing all of that. Can do is a bit of a pun on that because I work in a team called Can Do, which is because we look after the customer and the order, but also because we can do those things. And that includes fraud prevention, customer data, order data, and payment data. Fraud prevention, a few years before, we'd built a new solution inside our legacy platform, which was very successful. Customer data, we have a sister team who had developed a new solution to act as a repository for that, and we're in the business of writing a new one for order data. And payment data, talk to Frank doesn't mean that we were taking drugs on that. It's Frank, who is the manager of the other team, is also full of fantastic ideas to try and make things better, and had cunning plans around building the new payments platform. So we had a bit of a challenge in terms of how we deal with looking after fraud and so on for a whole new platform that actually didn't exist yet at that point. We kind of knew what things may be in it, but it was going to exist in about a year, and to integrate with an existing legacy platform. But we didn't have direct access to anything because we were doing this for the Bologna teams first. And although we were technically about to become one company, if you've been through a merger before, you know full well that there's no such thing as one company, especially not for the first couple of years, and certainly not on the tech stacks. So nobody who was familiar with the YAPC data was involved in discussions. It was just technical architectures and technical architects and people from IBM. And we were aware that there would be a language barrier and a culture barrier, because not necessarily because people were from Italy or whatever, but because it's two different companies, and we always speak different languages in different places and so on. And we were accustomed to doing things a certain way, they were accustomed to another, a whole bunch of stuff. But anyway, I proposed a solution because I'm full of hubris. And it was basically that we would take our existing fraud service, build it out into a new application, have a simplified data model because we had no idea what their data was and they couldn't tell us. All very, very simple stuff, asynchronous integration so that we didn't really have to touch any of their systems. And it was accepted by the stakeholder, the architects. We had a simple plan. We knew it was too simple, but that's all right, plans change. Nothing ever works the way you expect it to. And so we jumped in. Now, we started off with what we thought was a fairly simple question, which was, what does your data look like? Not all your data, just the simple stuff like what's an order look like, what does a customer record look like, and a payment. But apparently that wasn't so simple, partly because they were in the business of changing it all, moving to the new IBM platform and so on. But also partly because they didn't actually have anyone that we could speak to about it, many people not wanting to change from being software developers to being implementers of huge monoliths from IBM. So it was difficult to get people who knew their legacy platform to come and speak with us. But we thought, that's okay, we'll work that bit out in time. To some extent, what the data looks like can be abstracted away. We can come up with a model that sort of works. We can get on with doing the interesting bits, which would be taking the fraud rules engine, the management for that, and thinking about where we will put the data. And we thought that would be enough to deliver something minimal that we can get some feedback on. And so we started building that. And we started meeting the stakeholder regularly, or so we thought. I'll come back to that in a minute. The interesting thing for us was really this rules engine that we'd already written. So for us, the rules engine was essentially a DSL, a domain-specific language, which describes a set of rules, made up of one or more conditions, and each of those conditions just evaluates a single assertion, and you get back true or false. And then based upon the rule specifies an action to be taken against the order, and the actions are really simple. You either accept the order and process it, or you don't. And potentially have someone take a look at it manually. And the rules step through each rule in sequence until they match one of them, and then it stops. Record the whole thing, that's it. It's incredibly simple. And it's all very safe, because all the data comes from the internet, where no one ever wants to do you any harm. And validating the data is very easy, because what's a valid name, what's a valid address, that's all very standard. And the rules, well, one of the reasons that we'd written this in the first place is that we didn't actually want to write any code. Well, in fairness, the business didn't want us to write code either, because when you write code, it takes ages to get anything done. Fraud is an area where people tend to come up with new and interesting ways to try and, well, at NAP we sell clothes that costs up to 30,000, 40,000 euros for a dress. And there's some potential market there to go and resell that on eBay or somewhere else if you can get it for free. And people come up with all kinds of ways of trying to get that off of you for free, and they can be quite clever sometimes. So we need to react quickly to that kind of thing, or at least our fraud management team needs to react quickly to those kind of things. Their experience, however, was the typical experience of a stakeholder. They ask for a change to something, and maybe a month, 2 months, 11 months later, we deliver a change, by which stage they no longer want it. So what we had done with this was to build a system that basically gave them this DSL, a way of managing those rules, and they can do it in production in real time, and they're happy, we're happy, we don't have to do any more work for it, in theory. And that worked very well. But again, some small challenges around how to do that and make sure that it's okay. Rolling this out for the new platform, we had a slight problem, as in, where's all that data? It wasn't with us. It was in a completely different platform. And initially, we were doing this not for the NAP side of the business, but for UX, because they already had a program going on to deliver this IBM stuff. They're expecting to deliver it. In fact, they delivered the first part of it last month. And all the data we need is in their legacy platform. We don't have access to that. We don't particularly want access to it. It's going away. But we need to put it somewhere that we can use it. And we don't want to repeat a whole bunch of mistakes that we and they have made in the past. And maybe we can do better than that. So we thought about where the data should be. Well, we were already on a platform moving towards service-oriented architecture, because it's easier to operate. Where we already had the data was in the existing databases. It's simple to operate on because it's in your local database, but it's probably wrong. It'll be out of date. Someone else would have updated the data that they have in their local database, and you won't know about it. And that kind of thing is useful if you're going to be making decisions about whether to tell a customer to go away, or perhaps refuse to accept their money, or maybe accept the money that you thought was for the customer, and it turns out that it's not, it's for one of you fine people, because you all wanted to buy £30,000 brooch or something, didn't you? And we had a limited ability to interact with other processes around security and fraud prevention and so on. We were already moving to service-oriented architecture, and we wanted to move to a point where we had an authoritative place where the customer data, the order data, and so on was. We were building those services already with RESTful APIs, which is all nice and easy to work with. We needed to do something around aggregation of data and tracking behavior and so on and that kind of thing, for which we eventually decided Elasticsearch looked like a good solution. We didn't actually have any experience using Elasticsearch, but it looked like it might be a good solution. And hey, how hard can it be? But so far I have not actually talked about anything at all to do with Perl. I'm waffling on about fraud and various things that are fun about joining a merger and so on. And I did say that this talk would be about why we chose to use Perl for this. So why did we choose to use Perl? I was asked that. Having labeled Perl as legacy, some people within the management structure at NAP had an enthusiasm for the new and shiny, hence we were doing things in Scala. Had an enthusiasm for the JVM, because it's kind of nice to have a common platform for things. did have a common platform for things, but another one. And so there was an assumption that all the new things would be built on the JVM one way or another. We weren't quite ready to use Perl 6 yet, which we could have done on the JVM. And arguably Perl 6 wasn't quite ready for us to use. So I was asked after we'd started the project, because I'd been rather careful not to mention how we were going to build it. It doesn't matter how we'll build it. We'll have some software engineers that will build some software. You'll be happy. Go away and don't ask about that. So after we began, my manager came up to me and said, are you building this in Perl? To which I responded by pointing to the team that I work with of Perl developers and to the sales pitch we'd given showing the existing Perl-based system and the offer of we can just take that out and reuse it here and so on. And said, oddly enough, yes, we're building this in Perl because we already have parts of it in Perl. We've got this amazing team. Someone's sitting at the back there from my team of Perl developers who are really experienced and have proven themselves to be able to deliver really good software. And in Perl, we've got this mature, battle-tested framework, really useful to be able to use phrases like that, with all the frameworks, components, and so on we want. Most of the libraries we need already exist, so we don't have to actually write much software, in theory. And so it was possible to just turn around and say, well, yes, go away. And it was acceptable enough because we could then write in a document, or at least my manager could write in a document, we're writing this in Perl, we may rewrite it somewhere later on in Java, but as everyone knows, working software trumps theories. We did have a slight challenge about getting the data, which I mentioned before, but at about the same time that my team did the rules engine in our legacy platform, we'd also written a small data transformation gateway application. Really simple things, just presents a REST API, consumes data from a message consumer and produces on simple plugin architecture and so on. Nothing very special. I imagine most people have implemented something similar. But that meant we already had a tool that we could just basically say, okay, well, send us all your data, we'll chuck it into our platform somehow. And it's ideal for asynchronous integration, which is what we wanted to do. So we didn't have, again, we had another area where Perl was the right choice because we already had the tool we needed-ish. The new thing we wanted to build was called Conrad. We built this in 2013, and the name bears no relationship whatsoever to anyone involved in fraud at all at that time. Those of you who know the history of the Daily Mail will know exactly why it bears no relationship at all to a certain Conrad something or other. But it's a very simple fraud application. Anyone who's done one will know you basically have some way of working out how you score things, a way of creating lists for blacklists, whitelists, grey lists, reference lists to be able to search the data, maybe do some chargeback management and so on. And essentially just give enough tools to the team that will be doing the business part of this so that they'll be happy, in theory. That's more or less what we proposed. A really simple architecture. The order management platform would send messages over RabbitMQ because that's RabbitMQ would give us some clustering and blah, 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 and it's what they're already using. We were thinking about moving from ActiveMQ to RabbitMQ. So we thought, why not? How hard can it be? Mercury is this little transformation layer, suck the messages in, chuck it into the platform, index it, then tell Conrad to do a fraud check and it would send the message back, and that's really simple. From our proposal to build Conrad, or our intention to build, was all Perl in the back end, a bit of JavaScript on the front end, Postgres for the bits that we have to store the data locally, because, hey, it's a database, it works, and it's reliable. DBX class, LWP, there's nothing on there that's going to be a surprise to anyone. We were using the safe module so that we could eval things without, well, basically we needed to have this DSL that our users could create the rules on against this data that was coming from slightly untrusted sources. And we wanted to make sure that we could put some reasonable constraints there and not have people phoning us up at 4 o'clock in the morning, or our alert system giving us things at 4 o'clock in the morning for your whole system just vanished and deleted all your data or something silly like that. safe.pm allows you to say, okay, well, for that kind of operation, you can use that limited set of operations at quite a low level, and it's easy enough to use. And then, oddly enough, we used stuff from CPAN. But where did we go wrong? So you may have noticed a few times before I kind of quoted about our stakeholder. It turned out that the person who we were working with, who was the stakeholder, wasn't the stakeholder. Politics, fun and games. And we had this issue about who we're talking to for data, for integration, and so on. We also had some other slight hiccups as a result of the merger, in that suddenly the teams responsible for providing the platform for us to build software and so on decided they didn't know who they were anymore. We had some delays around that. Eventually we got to the point where we had things ready to deploy, several months late, but hey, it's a software project. If it's not late, we've not done it right. And we started to experience some issues around the way that we were doing things, moving from having everything in a local database where it's all convenient, you can just join off of the data, it's all there, you just work with it, to a service-oriented architecture means that all of a sudden the data that you had in one place is in many places, and you have to think a little bit differently for that. Things like concurrent access to the data and so on, so that it doesn't take between 7 and 40 seconds to load a simple page to display some audit data. That's the result of a controller that basically sequentially went and got the data bit by bit and tried to go and get all the data from all the different sources before displaying anything. Yes, we're very clever that way. Hey, everyone makes mistakes. And we had to do some new things that we had to learn. We had to learn how to use Elasticsearch, which I still have no idea how to use, but then I'm a manager, I'm not supposed to know how to do things. My team, however, have learned an enormous amount about it and been very successful. We had to start integrating with extra third parties, one of which was ThreatMetrix. They give you back some data about the connection. And RabbitMQ, which is just a messaging platform. And there's no difficulty at all integrating with a completely different messaging platform. But we managed to find a few anyway. Those things all going wrong didn't go that wrong. I mean, we had a lot more work to do than we expected, partly because not knowing who your stakeholder is means that you end up going down one road, while someone else who should have been your stakeholder thinks you should be going down that road, and fun and games. We managed to resolve that. Everyone was really happy to learn that that would mean that it would take an extra few months to deliver. Whatever. The meh whatever bit is really about, we had a year to deliver this, and we kind of, if we'd got everything right, we thought 3 or 4 months. We knew we wouldn't get everything right. So we did deliver the product, and we had measured success. I say measured success because we were producing metrics for everything, so we can display how well we're doing with it, or how poorly at points, 7 to 40 seconds. That didn't actually require very many metrics. You could just sit there and go, which our users did. But we had a metric that would also tell us that. So we were gathering all the metrics for everything we were doing, anything that we were doing, whether it was running the rules, whether it was loading pages, retrieving data, and so on, and just throw them out via StatsT to Graphite, display it via Grafana, which is nice because then we can just have a whole bunch of screens that we can share with our users, and they can also tell us, hey, shit, that just went up high, really, really high, which is a useful way to get alerts out as well. And in the rules engine, we produce an audit trail for everything we do, which is kind of nice and useful. By that audit trail, what I mean is each rule that we evaluate, we basically log a big JSON payload that says, okay, we checked that rule, and that condition, that matched, that didn't match, and so on, which is useful when the users turn around and say, this new fraud system, it doesn't work at all. And oddly enough, that's what happened. But that's okay because we were able to work out why, because we'd done those things and so on. I guess we got to the point, we've gone live with this. We're still going more live with it. It's software. You're not supposed to do it all at once. And this talk was really about saying, well, why did we use Perl for it? I've said that already. The whole battle-tested thing, the experienced team. The fact that we knew that if we ran into problems, we could pop onto IRC as well as talk to people locally, or look on Stack Overflow if we really wanted to. The fact that everything that we wanted was essentially already at our fingertips. CPAN. It's not hard to make a decision about that kind of thing, particularly when the option is do it in a platform that you already know, with a community around you that can help you to make sure that everything works well and have already essentially written everything, or go for the new shiny, which is shiny. So this talk is really just a way for me to say thank you. You helped me keep my job.